Back everyone to the second part in the Watch Me Build series. In the previous session we covered the basics around what problem it is that the A2A protocol seeks to solve, and just to recap, A2A standardizes the way in which agents communicate and collaborate with one another. You'll hopefully recall that one of the challenges today is that everyone's implementing agents using different frameworks like LangChain, CrewAI, Google's own agent development kit, as well as being served from different cloud providers, Google Cloud, AWS, Azure, and also even implemented in different programming languages like Python, Go, JavaScript, etc. So exposing these languages and these agents and their capabilities via A2A allows these agents to work with one another seamlessly in a completely sort of agnostic to the specific implementation details of any particular agent. So in today's session, we're going to start getting practical and start building out our own A2A agent. But before we do, there are a couple of things to consider and decide on before we start implementing. So for those decisions, I'm just going to refer to the A2A project documentation, which I have in front of me. And I'm just going to jump to section 3 here, which speaks about transports. So it's worth noting that A2A supports multiple transports. And what does this actually mean? It means that there are several valid communication mechanisms to communicate with an A2A server, and any A2A server must implement and support at least one of them. So, as I mentioned, there are 3 of them. So these are the JSON-RPC transport, the gRPC transport, and the normal REST HTTP based transport. Now, the third one is probably the one that most would be quite familiar with, just standard HTTP REST, whereas the other 2 perhaps are slightly less familiar. So JSON-RPC is just a light remote procedure call RPC protocol on top of JSON. Makes it very simple and operates over just a standard HTTP post requests. In contrast, gRPC is a high-performance framework that enforces a strict definition-first approach using binary encoded protocol buffers or protobufs. This works over a more modern HTTP 2 protocol, which makes gRPC significantly more performant, and also supports out-of-the-box advanced features like bidirectional streaming, etc., that are not native to something like JSON-RPC. And so adopting this sort of strict definition-first mindset and all of the out-of-the-box features that we get with gRPC, we'll be implementing our agent via the gRPC transport. At a later stage, as a nice to have, perhaps we'll even support multiple transports within our A2A server, but we'll just start with this one for now. So I think the next natural question is, what does it actually mean then to implement a gRPC version of the A2A specification? Well, if we navigate to the GitHub project for the official A2A project, we'll see there is a specifications folder. And in the specifications folder, there are the specifications for the different transports. And there's the JSON one, which is obviously like the HTTP based, and then there's the gRPC. And if we go into here, we note an A2A.proto file. So what is this file? A proto file is effectively the blueprint for what it means to implement an A2A server as a gRPC service. So this proto file contains the methods and endpoints and the data objects such as requests, responses, and all of the resources within A2A in a completely language agnostic way. So once you've got this defined and you put this down up front, what effectively your A2A interface is. Once you have this defined, you use a compiler like Proto-C to compile these into your language-specific artifacts that provide the required definitions and interfaces that need to be satisfied for implementation in that specific language. And that actually leads me to the second point that I wanted to motivate, is the choice of language we'll use for implementing our agent. So most people would probably have guessed for the natural choice would be Python, but I'd like to actually challenge that and make the case for Golang, or Go for short, as a more ideal choice. Firstly, similar to the philosophy of protocol buffers and gRPC, Golang is strictly typed, which makes it more robust and easy to experiment with. It also has features like concurrency built in by default, which is really useful in agentic AI. It also compiles into really lightweight binaries, which, when deployed into a managed serverless solution like Google Cloud Run, which we eventually plan to do, makes for really small and lightweight Docker images, which leads to lower startup times and latencies, etc., which are all important considerations when thinking about a production-grade multi-agent system. And so with that scene set, namely the choice between our A2A server being implemented via the gRPC A2A transport, and we will be using Go as our implementation language, let's get into some of the coding aspects. So in front of me, I've just got my VS Code IDE up with just a very simple project running. I'm going to be making use of the Alice build platform extension for the development of the agent. Where there are any specific features that I'm making use of, I will point them out just to make you aware of that. But yeah, so let's just get going and get our Go project started. So the first thing I've got at the moment, the only thing I've got set up is just a simple Go mod tidy, a Go mod file. That's just sort of a standard way for defining a Go project nowadays with the latest versions of Go. I've already compiled the .proto definitions that we saw just now into the Go protobufs myself ahead of the time, and so I'm not going to actually cover that here. If you want to understand the process behind this, I'd definitely recommend checking out the gRPC IO website, where they have a bunch of tutorials and all the supported languages. For example, here's just the quick start for Go, so it just explains how one goes from the actual .proto definition files to your language-specific protobufs. And yeah, just having an understanding of the mechanisms behind that. The Alice X platform takes care of a lot of that for me, so I'm just leveraging those capabilities and have done so. Registered those .proto files ahead of the time to make them easy to access now. So we've got our go.mod file. So the first thing that we need to do is actually put down just a server file. So we're just going to call this our server.go. We're going to just have this be a package, just our main package. And this effectively is going to be our file where we need to our server, like our server entry point needs to live. And so to do that, we need to figure out, or need to know, how do you set up a gRPC server in Go. Unfortunately, Google Cloud documentation for Cloud Run specifies an example of this for us. So Google Cloud Run as a service is really great for this because HTTP2 transport is supported. So we can use Cloud Run to support our A2A gRPC server. So I'm just going to copy this across here. At least as a starting point, I'm going to copy, just to simplify this a little bit, I'm just going to hard code the port to 8080. I'm missing some imports here, so I'm just going to just put the net package there. The other thing I'm going to include is just the Go Alice build logging package, just a lightweight wrapper around structured logging for Google, and just make those changes. And then the other package that is required is the google.golang.org/gRPC. I'm just going to comment this out for now. We'll get back to that in a second. but just want to make sure that that's up and running. So let's just, so all I'm doing now is effectively running a gomod tidy, which is just download of all my required packages. Okay, oh wait, I've still got some errors here, so we need actually a context. So I'm just going to create a context quickly, and yeah, I think this takes in a context. Yeah, it takes in a context. This takes in context. This takes in a string. So just fix that there, and then we just need to import. Sorry, context.com, context.background, right. Okay, so we've got no compile errors. Now this piece here, so this is quite a critical piece. So this is where you register your specific service or your gRPC service onto your server. So for that we require now the Golang version of the protobuf, the A2A protobuf that we generated. So like I mentioned, I've already done this ahead of the time, and so I've got this in a package that exists on artifact registry. If you were to compile it yourself, you would probably have these locally somewhere on your machine. But yeah, to make this easy, I've got them already. It's already set up as a compiled package sitting on Google Artifact Registry, and I can now use this. Let's actually first just download this again. We're just pulling those definitions. Great, so we've got the definitions available on our workspace now. So what I want to do now is actually register the A2A service definitions onto the server. So to do that, we go register, and it takes in this gRPC server that we created, so exactly like straight from the Google Docs. And the difference here now is we need to provide an A2A server. We need to point this gRPC server. We need to register the A2A server on the gRPC server, and so we need this A2A server. So this is where we don't actually have this yet, and so we need to start implementing it. So what does it look like to actually start implementing it? So to do this, we're going to create a new file, and we're going to call it a2a.go. So this is going to be where we implement our gRPC A2A server. So when implementing a gRPC server in Go, the first thing that you need to do is register a type, and this is effectively, you can think of this similar to like a Python class, where we, let me just grab these imports quickly. Where we define effectively an similar to like an unimplemented version of a class, and then we need to actually go and implement all the different methods. So we just want to quickly initialize our server. So this is just our A2A server type, and now we need to actually start implementing the methods that are on the server, or on this A2A service definition. So if we just look here, the one we're going to start with is the GetAgentCard. So before anyone can use your agent, they first need to know what the agent can do for you. And then we briefly discussed this last week. The agent card is effectively like the business card of the agent, and so this is the first RPC that we want to actually implement. And you see that it's called GetAgentCard. It takes in the GetAgentCard request and returns an agent card. So let's get that down. So if we just maybe want to copy this across, it'll just be useful reference. So we need a new function, and we are implementing a method that is on this type. So the A2A service methods, all the methods that we need to implement live on this type now, but are all unimplemented, and we need to therefore implement them. So it's called GetAgentCard, right? And this takes in a context, context.context, and takes in a request, and the request type is a PV A2A dot get agent card request, and it returns a PV A2A dot agent card and an error. So we need to, and you see now everything is compiled. So we have satisfied, we've satisfied there's no type errors, and this is effectively our very baseline GetAgentCard method. So what does it look like to actually populate an agent card? So these are all the properties that one can think of, or that one can populate for an agent card. So again, like the business card of your agent. So for now, let's just keep this quite simple, and we'll just give our agent a name. So let's say we were building a weather agent. So let's just call this weather, city weather agent. And so anybody that wants to consume this particular agent would be able to hit this .getAgentCard method and be able to see what the agent is all about, what can it do. So if we just think about populating a little bit more data, so provides city-based weather reporting information. Who is the provider? So let's show another sort of important, useful thing for now. We'll get to some of these. I'm just actually going to clear some of these out just to make this a little bit cleaner for now. So let's actually just clean this up. Clean this up a little bit. So who is the provider of this agent? So if I, in my capacity as employee at Alice Exchange, were developing this agent, I would put the URL of the provider as www.alicex.com, and the organization I would put as Alice Exchange. So anybody interacting with your agent can now know what organization is responsible for this agent, who are they, and where can I find more information about them, right? So now we've got a really basic AgentCard RPC method up and running. So the next thing we want to do is just to be able to actually test whether we can get some AgentCard information and pretend like we are a client requesting information from this agent. So to do that, let's just set up a A2A underscore test.go file. So we're going to similarly put this in our main package again, and let's set up a few things. So for this, we're just going to set up a local client to effectively mimic. The idea is to run our our A2A server on localhost. For now, we're not hosting it on Cloud Run. We just want to run it locally, and then we want to mimic being a client to that server and being able to make a request to it. So I'm just going to grab this. So these definitions, so I just want to import our protobuf definitions. So the protobuf definitions obviously allow us to, this would be required on both the server and the agent side. So as an agent, as a client, I can specify a new client to this particular service. I just want to put some init function quickly, just for some initialization aspects, and then just want to put down our A2A test method. So let's agent card. Okay, we need the testing. Okay, so we'll get to that. So yeah, we've got our local client set up, and now for the initialization, so let's just put some comments. We want to register the local A2A client. So the way to do this is just, okay, we also need the, just google.golang.org/gRPC. Okay, so to do this, we're just going to set up very sort of standard, a new gRPC client. This is available standard sort of documentation for creating a client to a gRPC service. And we know we're going to be running our server on localhost and port 8080, so we're just going to initialize like that. And for now, because we're running this locally, we want this to be an insecure connection. So we're not going to have any authentication or authorization on top of this at this point. And now we just want to check for errors. I'll just do a quick now. Okay. Port that package. Right, so if there's no errors at this point, then we can just initialize our local client, so a new A2A service client, and we can just pass it in that connection. So at this point, it's not actually connected to anything, to any gRPC transport, but at this point, we've now got it hooked up to our transport. So this just happens on initialization when we run the script. So now we actually need to populate our request to our A2A server to get an agent card. So if we need some typo there. We need a context of background, and then we need to define our request. So again, if we look at this GetAgentCard method, what does it require as input? It requires context and it requires the request object. So we've created our context, and we need to create our request object. So that's GetAgentCard request. And now we're ready. Yeah, this doesn't take in any arguments, so it's just an empty request. And now we can make our request to our local client. So our local client dot, and which method are we wanting to hit our GetAgentCard, and we pass it in our context and our request message. So if the errors, we check if the error is not equal to null. If the error is null, then we want to raise an error. So our local client dot GetAgentCard that gave us this error equals that, and then pass in our error. If we didn't get an error, okay, we'll just want to return that, might be redundant. And if we didn't get an error, then we just want to actually print out our response. So, right, I think we're there now. So we've got our test method set up. We've got on our server, we've actually registered this A2A service. That is pointing to the A2A server object, which is sitting in our A2A.go. So we've created this, and we have implemented one method on that gRPC server interface so far, which is just our GetAgentCard, and we are just mimicking a local client wanting to hit that method and get back the agent card information as if any sort of client or user wanting to engage with our agent would. So ahead of the time, I've set up some VS Code configuration. So I've just got a launch file to help me run this program. So it's just pointing to where my program is. I'm in the agents v1 folder, and I've got an environmental variable with all my my Google Cloud credentials and everything I need once we get to the point of needing to do any cloud authentication or authorization. And so I'm just going to simply run this server. In debug mode. And so if everything is running as it should be, okay, I didn't actually include any logging that the server is running, but it's running. So now we can test our GetAgentCard method. So we can just debug this. And we just go to our debug result, and you see the result we got back is our agent card, whatever we populated in our agent card. So it's a city weather agent. Here's the description, and this agent is provided by Alice Exchange, where you can find more information available about them at the provided URL. So just to recap, we've decided we are going to implement a gRPC based A2A server in using Go for the execution logic. What we've done at this point is we've had the .proto gRPC proto file compiled into our Go protobufs. We've pulled those in as a package, which conveniently is sitting in an artifact registry, into our Go project. We have then set up a normal gRPC server as provided by Google Cloud documentation as to how to go about it. We've registered our very specific A2A server onto the A2A service onto this gRPC server. In order to do that, we needed to actually go and specify what this service was as an unimplemented A2A server, and then go and implement all the methods that sit on that object. For now, we've just started with the agent card one, because that is the sort of first level of engagement that any user or other agent would have with our agent that we're building out, is to request information. Who are you? What is your business card? What can you do for me? Etc. And so this is kind of a good starting point for being set up. And in the next session, we'll continue to expand on this, look a little bit more into the agent card, and then start actually fleshing out the other RPC methods that allow us to start engaging and having our agent perform tasks for us. So yeah, on that note, thanks very much for tuning in again, and yeah, look forward to next week's session.